Perfect. Well, we can get started. I know we got a good handful of folks that should be trickling in, and here they start to come, and we can start the recording. I hear good meetings start on time and end on time. So yeah, everybody here knows me, so they're probably sick of hearing this, but yeah, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Here Now Project's first DACWA Forum of 2024. Gosh, it sounds weird saying that number. My name is Kenny Salvini, and I'm the co-founder and president of Here and Now, and we serve as the Washington chapter of United Spinal Association. Our mission is to connect and empower the paralysis community in the Pacific Northwest, and we've done so over the years with care baskets to the newly injured, a rotating calendar of monthly support meetings all over Western Washington, as well as potlucks, barbecues, all sorts of other activities. And these DACWA forums put on by the great longtime wheelchair users and the formidable force that is the Disability Advocacy Coalition of Washington, or we call them the DAC. Yeah, and I can kick it off to our MC, Elaine Stefanowicz, to introduce all the great speakers and presenters to talk about what's going on. Take it away, Elaine.
Yeah, hi, Kenny. Are you going to talk about the disclaimer at all? Is that something we need to say that we just give?
Oh, yeah, we can, basically we are non-professional by nature with the Here Now Project, and we're not attached to any specific advice or anything like that we utilize. So it's mostly the experience, strength, and hope of other wheelchair users. So yeah.
Oh, great. Thanks, Kenny. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Elaine, and not going to do a whole lot of talking, just welcome you here. And we're so glad you could make it tonight. And we have some great speakers ahead. The legislative session just started on Monday, and it's a short session, but doesn't mean there's any less bills. There's a lot of bills concerning people with disabilities, and this is just one of them. So we hope that you get involved with the legislative session. Just to give you a rundown, this evening, Marsha Cutting and Marty Whitman will be kind of introducing and talking about the right to repair bill that affects people who use power wheelchairs. And then Marsha has invited a person to be here who is a lobbyist who will explain more about the bill. And then Elizabeth Gordon, who happens to be my supervisor. I work for the Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment in Olympia, and she's my supervisor, and she is going to give you a kind of a rundown of Legislation 101 and how to know more about certain bills, what process they go through in the House and the Senate, and how you can testify for a bill. So, and then the lobbyist will only be here for a short time. So I'll go ahead and turn it over to Marsha. Marsha is also a member of the Governor's Committee and a wonderful advocate for people with disabilities. And Marty Whitman, he and I met in 1982 after our accidents. We were both in the same hospital, and we've been friends ever since, which is 41 years, and which is crazy to say out loud. And he is another great advocate for people with disabilities, and has helped more people than can probably be counted, help with their wheelchairs and different issues. So go ahead, I'll turn it over to you, Marsha.
Thank you. We will have Mr. Engelking with us for 45 minutes. So I think that's a pretty good time. And he is willing to answer questions. So that's good. And I've kind of asked him to focus on the bill itself so that Elizabeth can focus on the legislative process. And I probably should say that Steve Lewis is also a member of the Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment. So I heard about Right to Repair through United Spinal, through their newsletter, and well, when Colorado passed their bill, and I was really interested in that. When my insurance company is paying, I take my chair to one of the local mom and pop shops, but when I'm on the hook, that's kind of a different matter because I don't have a lot of spare cash. So luckily I have friends who can fix my chair. So when I heard about right to repair, I was really interested. And I knew that there was a bill in the Washington legislature last year on right to repair, but it did not include power wheelchairs. So through a process that's not worth going into, I tried to see if we could get that added. And I just really have to give a huge thank you to Marty because, you know, my perspective is just as a wheelchair user and I hear the horror stories, but I don't know what goes on behind the scenes. And Marty has worked in this business for umpty-ump years. And so it is just incredibly useful to have his perspective also represented in this struggle. So Marty, do you want to say something?
Oh, I suppose. Thank you for the nice introduction there, Elaine and Marsha. That's very kind. So I never thought I'd get involved in something like this. Marsha asked, and it's just the right thing to do. So here I am. And just so you know, Marsha and the rest of you, I did talk to a friend of mine who's in the industry. He's a manufacturer's rep. He's a rep for Permobil. His name is Jeff Sparacio. And I talked to him about the bill. He didn't really know anything about it. He didn't seem to have at the moment I talked to him, kind of caught him off guard. He didn't have a reason to support it or not support it. He was going to do some more looking into it. He thought it might be interesting, you know, if it were to pass, that it could be a business opportunity for somebody to start a business in supplying parts, because I'm assuming that if this does pass, then that would be maybe an option for somebody, because somebody's got to go somewhere to get the parts. So anyhow, I'm involved because I think it's important, especially for power chair users. For manual chair users, maybe not so much, but definitely power chair users. And if there's, Marsha has a friend who's made sure the ferries have been running for many, many years. And that's who she goes to. Why can't we get parts so that she can get back up and running and not have to wait for a dealer or rehab tech or insurance to get our chair fixed? That's kind of nonsense, really. It wouldn't be allowed in any other place. People wouldn't stand up for that. You kidding me? So that's why I got involved. So thank you, and I'm available for questions at any time.
Thank you. This is Craig Engelking, and I have just met him, I think on Sunday, at a meeting about this bill. And he is a contract lobbyist in Olympia, and he's working with WPIRG, which is Washington Public Interest Research Group, I believe, on this legislation. And so he's the one that knows how to get things done and all that sort of stuff. And so I have asked him to kind of focus on the bill itself, and I believe he's open to questions. Is that accurate?
Sure. Well, thank you, first of all. Yes, I'm definitely open to questions. And I'm happy to talk about, you know, the bill. I'm not really a subject, like a policy expert necessarily, but I am familiar with the legislation and can kind of talk about some of the basic gist of it and the context and, you know, some related pieces. And then also, I think maybe it would be helpful if I talk about, you know, advocacy and how to really, you know, affect the process in Olympia. That's kind of what I was thinking too. How's that sound?
Sounds perfect. Thank you.
Great. Well, maybe would it be okay if I just tell a little bit about my background too, just so you.
Please.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, my name is Craig Engelking, and I'm a contract lobbyist in Olympia. And this session will actually, I think it's my 26th or 25th legislative session working as a lobbyist. And I first started back in the 1999 session and worked on some recreational and environmental issues with the Washington Trails Association. And then I went and worked for the environmental group Sierra Club for about 10 years. And from there, I went to the city of Seattle and was for 4 years the city of Seattle's chief state lobbyist. And back in 2013, I left the city and started doing contract lobbying work. And most of my work focuses on around sustainability, environmental issues, sustainability, community-based organizations, and helping create opportunities for people who don't ordinarily get them in the flow of things, and you know, things basically in that realm. So some of my other clients include, I work with 2 Native American tribes here in Washington, the Lummi Nation and the Kalispel tribe. I work with the Sierra Club. I work with the Northwest Energy Coalition. And then I also do a lot of work on outdoor education for kids, helping get kids outdoors, you know, for outdoor education. So I work with Islandwood, which is, I think maybe you might know Islandwood, Marsha. We also have an outdoor school consortium. And then I also work with the Washington State Community Action Partnership, which is a statewide network of community action agencies, which helps people dealing with poverty to kind of navigate the maze and hopefully exit the maze. And I also work on some election reform stuff with Fair Vote Washington. So I try to focus my work on stuff that I feel, you know, really makes a difference in quality of life for people and for, you know, sustainability for our state. And that's how I came to be working on this particular issue. A big part of the right to repair movement across the country kind of comes from the perspective of, it's like multiple, you know, there are multiple reasons why it's important. One of them is because we just can't keep generating so much waste, you know, through the throwaway society. And more these days, it seems like manufacturers are not really designing things to last. And we see that a lot with electronic devices, where you have a culture of, hey, it's old, you know, it's not working so great anymore, just go buy a new one. You know, what's another $1,000 for a phone, or $2,000 or what have you? And that's kind of the culture. And that's kind of the way that a lot of the manufacturers have set it up, you know, just getting ready every couple of years, buy a new device. And what we're actually seeing is that this is creating a waste problem. In addition to being wasteful, it's actually contributing significantly to solid waste and electronic waste issues. And that's why some of the colleagues that we're working on this bill with are involved, like the city of Seattle and their solid waste, you know, their utility and, you know, solid waste management. So there's that part of it. But then there's also, you know, this consumer side, which is when you buy something, you know, you buy a phone or whatever it is that you purchase, who owns it? You know, is it yours, or is it still the people who manufacture it? And if you own it, you ought to have the right to be able to get it fixed and not be held kind of hostage by the manufacturer, who is, you know, could say, hey, it's going to be extremely expensive and we're going to take your device or what have you. And so this has been kind of a national movement, and legislation is passed in a number of states already to give consumers the right to repair, and to make sure that that's, you know, has a right. Here in Washington, it's interesting because we've been pushing the envelope with this legislation. It really first started the last couple of years, was targeted on electronic devices. And we've been pushing the envelope, and Apple basically has been what's killed the bill here the last couple of years, because they have had a model where they just want you to either pay them to fix it or basically buy a new phone. And that's been a big fight on that part. So they've been killing the bill the last couple of years, but the progress that we've made here has helped other states get across the finish line in getting stuff over. And so what we're trying to do this year is make another run at this legislation. And this year, it includes wheelchairs. And it's something that we have heard, you know, from around the country about all of the impacts, you know, and how difficult, expensive, how people getting the, you know, your wheelchair fixed might take up to 6 weeks, and what that can mean for not only, you know, for your mobility, for work, for your whole, you know, basic way of living, and the impact that it has. And so this is something that I think USPIRG, Public Interest Research Group, did a report called Stranded, which found that the average repair downtime for a wheelchair was 6 to 8 weeks. And so any rate, the legislation this year includes electronic devices, not all electronic devices, and some appliances. It's basically cell phones, laptops, iPad type things, that sort of thing. And then also agricultural equipment. That's the other kind of piece of this, is that there's, John Deere in particular has been very difficult for the farmers to work with in getting their ag equipment fixed. And so they could, charge just enormous amounts of money to get something like a blinker or just a, simple repair. So the legislation this year also includes the right to repair agricultural, like tractors, basically, and related things. And so that's kind of where the how it fits in and kind of where the legislation is coming from. And we're really hopeful this year we can get a decent bill over the finish line. Compared to last year, it seems like the tech companies are a little bit more willing to go along. Last year, Microsoft was actually pro on the bill, but because Apple was against it, it was just, proved to be a little too much. We're hopeful that Apple will be okay with the legislation. Google and Amazon are some of the other key tech players. Microsoft is still on board. They're not supporting the bill like they did last year, because this year the bill includes, wheelchairs and also includes the ag equipment. And Microsoft's like, well, that's kind of out of our lane, but we're okay with the provisions for electronic devices. And so they're helpful with the bill. They're not officially for it, but they're helpful in getting it through. And so that's kind of the lay of the land in terms of that's kind of the gist of what the legislation does and where it fits into this year, where it's come from. This is not the first year here in Washington. And Representative Gregerson, who is the prime sponsor of the bill, is phenomenal to work with and has been doing a great job of pushing this. And she definitely wants to get something over the finish line. And so what the bill basically does is it defines a number of items, electronic devices and other equipment that now includes electric wheelchairs. And then it basically says that they have to make the information available for repair available to independent repair shops, whatever they're giving to their to like any kind of authorized. They also have to make that information available for independent repair. And so now the way it works is a lot of times they keep that information back, the schematics or even specialized tools, things like that. Independent folks can't get access to it. So this bill, the gist of what this bill does is it requires those manufacturers to make those things available to independent repairs. A couple of things that have come up, key questions that we hear a lot. One of them is, will this void my warranty? And there's a really important part of federal law. I have a little gist of it here. Well, first of all, most of the time when something is under warranty, people will be happy to work to use the warranty to get the repair, first of all. So that's the kind of the first part of it. But manufacturers cannot, under federal law, cannot threaten to void the warranty for taking the device to independent repair. They just can't threaten to do that. It's pretty clear in the law. So they can kind of say things, they do say things like that, but they're not supposed to, and they can't actually legally effectuate it. It's illegal to use the threat of a voided warranty to prevent you from fixing things outside the manufacturer's control. It's just illegal. Excuse me. So that's something that we hear a lot about. The other thing that comes up a lot is that we hear, and it's not really related to the consumer side of it, but just so you kind of are aware of some of the things that we hear. You've heard a lot about like trade secrets and they'll be required to give away trade secrets, to independent repair. And they're not required to do that. That's actually, trade secrets is like controlled by another part of the federal law. Again, this is state legislation. So if it's an actual trade secret, they don't have to divulge it. So that information. And so it's kind of just a red herring, basically. And since we're talking about it, it's not specific necessarily to, just to the wheelchairs, but with devices, when they're repairing your devices, another thing that's come up is, people get concerned about, like, oh, if you're turning your phone over to someone who's repairing it and they might take your private information or photos or whatever. And there's actually language in the bill that actually protects your rights in that regard. And we added some amendments to the bill last year to kind of beef up the protection, even compared to what it is now. And even though that's the same thing, and it applies to original, equipment manufacturers, if they're doing the repair or authorized repair, just to help safeguard your information and your privacy if you're getting a phone repaired. So for example, if it doesn't require a passcode to do the repair, they can't ask for your passcode. They can only ask for your passcode if it's required to do the repair. Things like that. And signage being posted in the store so that you have your rights, you're clear on what your rights are as a consumer. So I think that's a kind of an overview of where the bill came from and what kind of key pieces of what it does. We're hopeful that we can get something over the finish line this year. The bill passed. It's a very similar bill. It didn't include wheelchairs, but similar bill passed out of the House last year and stalled out in the Senate committee. We had one member of the Senate Environment, Energy, and Technology Committee, Democrat from Mercer Island, Lisa Wellman, who opposed the bill. And we couldn't get any Republicans on board because of Apple's opposition. And we just didn't have the votes to get out of committee. So hopefully we can get over the finish line this year. And in terms of, I guess the last thing I'll wrap up with is in terms of where we are in the process. So in order to pass a bill and make it become law, it's got to go through about 30 formal steps actually along the way, from getting drafted and introduced to scheduled for a public hearing, having a public hearing, getting what we call exec out of committee, which is when the committee passes it out. Then it usually goes to a fiscal committee where it has to have another hearing and get exec out of there. Then it goes to rules, which is just kind of a staging ground before it goes to the full floor for a vote. And then it goes out of the House of Origin, we call it. In this case, it'll be the House. And then it goes over to the Senate and has to go through committee and, 2 committees, and then through the floor again. And then both chambers have to pass the bill in identical form. And when they do that, then it goes to the governor's desk for signature. So we're just towards the beginning of the process. The legislative session started on Monday. It lasts 60 days. We have till the end of this month, end of January, basically, to get the bill out of the committee where it is now and moving along. So along the way, it's got to meet certain deadlines along the way. And so we're at the very beginning of the legislative process here. And there'll be plenty of opportunities to weigh in, for you all to weigh in with your support for the legislation, from testifying, the hearing on Friday, to coming down to in-person lobbying meetings, and then also just meeting with your own legislators virtually. A lot of legislators are doing Zoom or Teams meetings now, and so there are plenty of opportunities to weigh in. I'll stop talking after this. Promise. Really the key thing, what I've noticed over 25 years of doing this, really the most powerful thing is when the legislators hear stories from real people about the real impacts of the policies that they're working on. And it's not really data that moves them. It's not, facts and figures that moves them. What really moves people is hearing the stories about the impact that you have. And so stories of, how expensive it is to get a repair, or how long you have to wait to get a repair, and what that means for you, and then what a difference this policy may make in your life. That's really what moves it's those stories and your own, real life impact, that when you tell those stories, that's really what moves legislators. And, it goes, I did some work with a professor from Harvard named Marshall Gans, who was a longtime organizer before he was a sociologist and professor. And he also was one of the chief architects of President Obama's first presidential campaign. And I did a 2-year project with him. And one things that I learned from him, I didn't know this, but it's emotions that really move people. And stories are the way that we transmit those emotions in our, kind of as human beings. And emotion and motor share the same root, M-O-T, to move, and so it's really just built into the word M-O-T, to move. That's really what it is. And so when you tell your story, about the real world impacts of these policies, that's what moves the legislators. So any way that, that I can be helpful for you all to facilitate that, I'm happy to do what I can to help you all be able to tell your stories. So that's a good place for me to pause.
Okay, maybe we should open it up to questions at this point. Do you want?
Sure.
Okay. I actually had one. I noticed you kept referring to independent repair shops, but I assume that also means like independent people. It doesn't have to be a specific repair shop, right?
That's correct.
Okay, just wanted to be sure. Does anybody else have questions?
Does the legislation include anything about restricting use of third-party replacement parts and or locking out said parts? Back to your tractor analogy, more familiar with the John Deere. They put in like DRM type chips in their control module, so you couldn't use somebody else's parts on the tractor, even if they might work the function. Is there anything in the legislation that covers those kind of right to repair stuff?
I don't think we can't really make them make it so that other people can't do it, but it's about giving people the ability to make the special tools or pieces that would be able to do the repair. That's kind of what I think that's the gist of it.
What is the best way to contact our rep to tell our stories?
Yeah, you can send an email to your legislators, and and then also request a meeting. And they often, with constituents, they will take a meeting, especially if there's a bill in play, that's moving through the legislative process. If you send an email to your legislator and say, here's my story, here's a short version of my story, asking for your support on this bill. And I'm also happy to meet with you to talk more if that would be helpful. Something like that would be, could be really impactful.
Yeah, I'm sort of realizing in listening to you that those individual contacts with legislators might be more important than testifying at a hearing, because I'm trying to get ready for the hearing on Friday. And, I have my 2-minute, my 1.5 minutes, and my 1 minute is still too long. But I can't get a personal story in there. It's just too short. I just have to talk about, this is why I support the bill.
Right.
But when you talk personally with the legislator, then it seems to me, is when you actually get to tell the story.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I have seen people be able to tell a quick story in testimony, and I remember on this bill last year, a woman working with Quaker Voices, I believe it was, told a very quick story about her phone that she had. And she said, I just finally figured out how to operate my phone. It stopped working. I took it in and they told me that I needed to buy a new one. And I don't want to buy a new one. I don't have $1,000 to spend on it. And I want to get mine repaired. And they said that they couldn't do it. And I just know that that's not true. And that was her story. And so it was pretty quick, but it was still a very condensed version of a longer drawn out story. So you can tell a personal story in the testimony. But and I think testimony is important for the legislators when they're sitting in a committee and they're looking at a hearing on the bill. What they're going to be moved by quick stories like that, and then they're also moved by the breadth of support or opposition and the different perspectives that people have. And so in this case, at the hearing on Friday, we're going to hear from you. Hopefully, we'll be hearing from environmental organizations. We'll be hearing from solid waste managers. We'll be hearing from consumer advocates. We'll be hearing from a cybersecurity expert. We'll be hearing from all these different perspectives that say this is a good idea. And that comprehensive, like the breadth of validation, if you will, from various perspectives helps give the bill, and the policy a lot of credibility moving forward, and then hopefully inspiration for the legislators to want to do it. So yeah, a quick story in hearings can work, but also just even those stories in a meeting or in a digestible email as well. I see we have one in the chat. The bill number is HB 1933. I'm going to put a link to the bill in the chat here. And the hearing is in front of the House Committee on Consumer Protection and Business. That's the name of the committee. Let me just I've lost my way here.
I see Marty has his camera on, which I'm guessing means he wants to ask a question.
That is correct. Good observation there, Marsha.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Craig, I just want to thank you very much for taking your time to be on this meeting with us. It's extremely valuable information. I've learned some things that I really didn't know. And I guess the question I have is somewhat broad. You've been in this business for a long time. Obviously, you've talked about what you've done in the past. What are our odds in this bill passing, do you think?
I think we have a good shot at it. There's a lot of momentum around the country. I feel like, I think the ag piece is going to be tough to pass the agricultural part because the Farm Bureau has reached an MOU, memorandum of understanding, with John Deere. And there are some issues in other states. A lot of farmers in other states have come into some problems with that, and it's not necessarily working as people thought it might in other states. We haven't necessarily seen the same level of concern coming from the farmers here yet, but it seems like it's starting to emerge. So it may be that this year is too soon for the ag piece to make it through. It remains to be seen. We'll try to keep it in, but there's always the possibility that part, comes out. And so what of the bill, if it would, jeopardize the bill, then, then that's what the kind of the judgment calls that you have to make when you're doing legislation like this that has some opposition is, a lot of times the opposition will say, well, here's some amendments. And if you take these amendments, we will no longer oppose the bill. And then you have to make a decision. Hey, are these amendments worth taking, or are we better off coming back next year? And sometimes they put stuff forward that would just gut the policy or kick it out for too long or make it impossible to implement. And so, that's the kind of stuff that, that's what we saw last year. Apple and others are putting forward some amendments that we just would have gutted the bill. We just said, no, we're not going to do that. I'm hopeful, though, that this year we have neutralized enough, the concerns and opposition from the tech companies that I feel like we have a strong chance of, getting those provisions through. And because it's the first year for the wheelchair provision, it's a little bit harder to predict how that goes. But if you all in your community, shows up in the various ways in support of the legislation, I think hearing your stories and comparing that maybe to a manufacturer who's not, who may have an issue or a concern and may not be on board with it, I tend to think that the legislators would be much more sympathetic to your all's perspective and what it means for you. But the key thing is having your voice, make sure that your voice is heard and that the policymakers have the benefit of that when they're, weighing what they hear. So and that's part of the reason why I wanted to come tonight, to kind of deliver that message that I do think I do appreciate the question. I think it's I think we have a decent chance, but I think you all could really make a difference in getting it over the finish line.
The other reason that I was glad, Craig, that you could join us is that I don't know if the people who are working on this bill are aware of just how critical an issue this is, because I think I hope they're aware that when our wheelchairs don't work, we're probably kind of trapped in our houses. We can't get out. But particularly for those of us who are high quads, injured at a pretty high level, it means being stuck in bed. And that exposes people to what are called pressure injuries. I guess they used to be called pressure sores, but my nurse friend tells me they're now called pressure injuries. And those can be life-threatening. We just lost an advocate for the wheelchair community by the name of Ingresia Figueroa, because the airlines damaged her chair. And during the time that it was damaged, she could not get a hold of a properly fitting chair to use. And so she developed a pressure injury. The infection went to the bone and she died.
Oh,
and that's not that's not like a freak thing. It happens to people. So for us, that's what's at stake here. It can be like a life or death thing. I mean, hopefully, usually it isn't, but it can be.
That's really tragic. Sorry to hear that. It's it's a very powerful story, though. It's I think those are the kinds of stories that will move legislators to want to take action and help, is hearing that impact. This isn't just when you tell us, when you hear about that, it takes, the cell phone is one thing, but when it's life or death and real quality of life too, of the difference of being able to go out in the world or being stuck in bed where you're risking an injury that could be life-threatening. I mean, that's very serious, obviously. And it puts a lot of I think a lot of energy into the compelling reasons to pass a bill like this.
So this is Elaine. Is there anything that I see people on here that are power chair users? How does this, I mean, you kind of explained how this affects them, but what can they do, right now to find more, or, decide if they want to support this? Just any last minute advice, Craig, of what people can do?
You can provide written testimony to the committee. It's just a form that'll go to the committee, basically. And you can just do a short, you can sit there and write it very briefly, and it goes in. Another thing to do is, if you're interested and you have the time, the hearing will be available on TVW, and TV is like tvw.wa.gov. And you can find, actually, and we can work to do this to help make it easy for you to do. Just, we'll grab the link for it after the hearing. And you can watch the hearing at your, convenience. It's stored online, and you can just kind of scroll through to where it starts, and you can watch and listen and see how it goes. So there's, the online testimony or written testimony, signing in pro on the bill, which is the same basic link. You see, I think the bill has about almost 200 people already signed in.
But you don't have to be a power chair user to support this, correct? It can be anyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I see something in the chat.
Yeah.
Oh, that's probably what you just put in. Oh, here. Does the bill cover manual chairs and other rehab equipment? Manual chairs, we know you'd all just go to the bike shop.
But and that's a true story. I was just at the bike shop today, exactly regarding a wheel. That's a very true story. So for the most part, I mean, it would cover manual chairs for sure. Any proprietary, I would hope that it would cover a proprietary part from a manufacturer. I would hope.
I think the bill says specifically power wheelchairs.
Yeah.
Because they were saying powered for a while, and we had to
Oh, right.
fix
Yeah.
that. Well, I see that we are coming to the end of the time that you graciously offered to us, and I know that you have small children that may be pounding on the doors.
Yes, and my wife who would like some help.
So if nobody has any further questions, I think we will say a huge thank you to you for joining us.
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, and I'll work with Marsha and others, any way that I can be helpful, to facilitate you weighing in, and also answering questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll try to track it down for you.
Well, thank you again. And yeah, this information's really been wonderful.
Thank you
Well,
very much, and
yeah.
hopefully we'll be able to talk again sometime soon. Thank you.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Thanks. Have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you too.
And thank you, Marsha, for arranging for him to be here. Our next person is Elizabeth Gordon. And like I said before, she's with the Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment. She's the executive director and my supervisor and friend. And so again, we're really lucky to have her here tonight to talk a little bit more about this. So Elizabeth, I'll turn it over to you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. And I do best at talking when people are interactive and ask questions. So please feel free at any moment to ask any questions that you want. To briefly go over how bills go through the process. We are in the short session this year, which means we have 60 days in this particular session. So things move pretty quickly during the second year of the biennium. The first year of the biennium is the longer session, and that is 105 days. I will say that my experience has been that the short session has just as much legislation as the long session does. It just moves a lot faster. So it's been interesting. All of my information is pretty much self-taught. I've been with the Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment since 2019. Yes, sorry, had to think there for a second. And I've done advocacy prior to that. I worked in community employment. And so I've been talking to legislatures for a long time, but this is the first time that I've ever really gone in and done formal testimony in front of our legislators. And I will tell you that my experience really overwhelmingly is that people are very nice. They're very understanding. They understand that it's difficult for people to come, and they're very appreciative. And if there's one thing I could say is telling your story is super, super impactful, and legislators really remember it. I have the opportunity to sit on various committees with legislators, and what they always talk about is how important it is when people come and share their story. So I'll just double down on what was shared earlier. So essentially, when a bill gets introduced in Washington State, it's going to get introduced either in the House or the Senate, and sometimes in both at once, although I think which is called a companion bill. And when those bills get introduced at the same time, it tends to be that they'll move in one house versus the other. It's not like they're going through the process simultaneously. But essentially what happens is every bill gets read onto the floor. It's introduced in its house of origin, and then it gets sent into a committee. And the committees are really organized based on certain bodies of work, and they do change the titles of the committee periodically, but they really try to send it to a committee where people have done some work with that kind of legislation and have some background. And so often when you're talking, if you go and you listen to some of the subcommittee meetings or some of their work sessions, there's some knowledgeable folks on there. And so you can learn a lot by listening to that. I wanted to start out here. I'm going to share my screen and I'd like to kind of take you through the website here, and I can show you where you can sign in to provide testimony and also where you can find information on bills. Okay, so when you come to the main home page of the legislature, it's going to open up onto this screen, and it looks really busy, but it's got a lot of information that is really what's happening right now. What I like about this during session is you'll see what committees are meeting on that particular day, and then you can really easily see the agenda. And I think because we were focused on the right to repair bill, I'm going to go ahead and take us to that subcommittee so we can see it. So one of the things that's nice is if you know that a bill is going to be heard on a particular day, you can actually pick a date here and look at what's happening. Or maybe you're going to be in Olympia and you want to see who's having meetings, you can do that. Before I leave this section, though, I do want to point out over here that there's a series of squares under Let Your Voice Be Heard. And these are some of your main menus for being able to get around. And there's been a lot of work. This little button here that says accessibility information. This was the result of some advocacy between Disability Rights of Washington, Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment, and a few other advocates to get this accessibility information put front and center so people can get what they need. The other thing that is super cool and is happening this year is that there's an ASL interpretation pilot for committee hearings. Previously, if you were going to attend a committee meeting, you would have to contact the accessibility office to get ASL interpretation. It was very inconsistent in how it was available. But what's really cool this year is they're doing a pilot where not only are they providing ASL interpretation at certain hearings when you request it, they're also doing a video of the ASL. So it's made it really accessible. So let's look here at how you would get to the hearing for the bill that we've been talking about today. So we know that the bill is going to be heard on Friday, and that is the 12th, correct? Yes, 12th. So when you do that, what it'll do is it'll pop up all the various committee meetings that are happening that day. And you know, if you're a person who doesn't know which committee you're going to, you can always pull up the agenda and it'll show you exactly what they're doing. So for this particular one, we know that we're going to consumer protection because this is really about the right of the consumer to fix their piece of equipment. So what's really cool is you can pull up the agenda, and one thing that is nice, and I'll show you this in a moment, is if you sign up to follow a bill, you'll get notifications because sometimes hearings move. They'll get pushed up or maybe they'll get postponed or something will happen. And it's just always nice to have that up-to-date information. So what you can see here is this is the schedule for the meeting on Friday. You can see that it's in the John O'Brien building. And when you get on Capitol campus, there's a map and it's pretty easy. But it's been really, ever since COVID, the ability to be able to testify remotely has really improved. And so it becomes really easy. So as you can see over here, right here, House Bill 1933, supporting the servicing and right to repair of certain products with digital electronics in a secure and reliable manner. That's the bill that you're looking for. And it's not unusual for bills to have a title that doesn't actually really get at the key issue you might be interested in learning about. So just something to be aware of as you're reading legislation. But you can just click on this bill. And I know that he provided you direct links. And what's really cool is you can go in here and you can see all the information you want to know about this bill. You can see that who the sponsors are. What is nice about this is if you happen to see, here's Mia Gregerson. She is listed first as one of the bill sponsors, and she's the prime sponsor. But you can see that there's a whole lot of other people who've signed on to be co-sponsors to the bill. And so it's always really good to take a look at this. And if one of your legislators happens to be a sponsor, that also gives you a way in when you're maybe doing an email correspondence with them or you're meeting with them. You can say, hey, I see you're a co-sponsor. Thanks for doing that. I'm really excited about this bill, and here's why it's important to me. This particular bill does not have a companion bill. If it did, it would say it right above the bill status at a glance. But what's really cool, and this actually gets, and I get really geeked out because I love research. So I realize that I'm probably overly excited about some of these things. But one of the things that gets updated the fastest is this little chart they have here where it shows where it is in process. And so as you can see right now, this bill has only just started its journey. It's in the House and it's in committee. But as it moves through the process, these little things get filled up, and then you can see that it's already passed through the House, and it'll say it passed the chamber, and you'll know that it's moving through the Senate. The other thing that you can see here, and maybe I'll be able to show you this with an older bill, is you'll be able to see if there have been amendments that have been proposed or if there's other versions of the bill. And as you go along also, the bill will get reviewed by state agencies, and maybe they'll write in and say that there's going to be a budget implication. And so you'll see a fiscal note on it. So that's all that is. The other thing you can do is if you're interested in taking a look at the various bills that maybe fall within a certain category, you can always take a look at committee meeting schedules and agendas. And what you can do is it'll show you all the various things that that particular committee is working on. The other thing that you can see here is all the bill introductions that have happened during this current calendar year. So for example, you can see bills that are introduced during the 2024 session. There. Let's try a different committee just so I can show you. So for example, tomorrow in the Education Committee, I can pull up the agenda for the 11th. And you can see here that they'll be doing a hearing on a bill. Now, this is a bill that was introduced during the first half of the biennium. And as you can see, there's a bunch of letters in front of the House bill where it usually says House bill. What this means is it's an engrossed second substitute House bill. So that means that there have been some revisions to it and that the committees have voted on those revisions and accepted it. So now they're hearing this particular version of the bill. And you can go to this page and you can see that this particular bill is about concerning restraint and isolation of students in public schools and educational programs. If you want to actually read the bill, you can click on it down below here, and you can see the actual most recent part of the bill. And as you can see, this particular bill has had a lot of work. So you have the original bill that was written as well as substitutes and engrossed substitutes, which means they've been voted on and accepted. And it shows you that in 2023, it went through all these various steps and it died in third reading, and it died in the Senate. It didn't get any further.
Elizabeth, somebody's asking what engrossed means.
Engrossed essentially this is what I think from my experience means that it's been through the committee and everybody agreed on that particular version of the bill. So it's passed through. So engrossed essentially means it's been voted on and accepted.
Thank you.
So as you can see, this particular bill died in April in the House Rules Committee. So if you wanted to sign up to testify or submit written testimony on this particular bill, you can see right here, it says sign up to testify and submit written testimony. You could also send a comment on this bill to your legislators from this page. You can sign up to get email notifications. I've honestly never done the RSS notifications, so I'm not sure how those work. So if somebody on this call has experience, please share it with the group. I get so many emails about various bills that I haven't tested that one because I just don't know what I would end up with. But if you wanted to send a comment on this bill or sign up to testify, you'd click here. And it gives you the ability to see all the bills that are being voted on in this particular, or being heard in this particular committee. And you can choose the one that you want to sign in on. In this case, it's the Student Restraint and Isolation Bill. And one of the things that I find really super helpful, sometimes there are hearings on a couple of different bills that our group is really interested in. So one of the things I like to do is I like to see who is signed in to testify and get a sense of how many people are showing up who are pro for the bill. So in this particular case, this is a bill that is abolishing using isolation in the public schools. It's definitely a bill that we would be for. So I would take a look at who's showing up to testify to see, gosh, are my partners going to show up to testify for this? And if I don't see very many people pro, then that might be a hearing I would prioritize as an advocate. Or I might push it out to my partners and make sure that they're aware that, hey, I'm not seeing anybody sign up. So you can select the bill you want to testify on. You can choose to testify in person. You can choose to testify remotely. This is super easy. So if you choose to testify in person, it gives you the option to be able to state your position and state whether you're part of a panel or not. Sometimes a legislator who is presenting a particular bill will put together a panel of people to support a particular bill. Testifying remotely, You know, I will say that the staff are super helpful. There's always people who sign in to testify in person and then end up being remote. They work really hard to make sure that people can have their voice heard, so they can be really supportive. And then if you want to note your position for the record, you would click here. You put your position, pro, con, or other. Sometimes, for example, if you're working for a state agency, some state agencies are unable to actually lobby for legislation. In fact, most state agencies are. So you might sign in as other and provide testimony as a way of being able to give education to people. And I'll say that for our group, Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment, we're cross disability. And so quite often, people will have different opinions within the disability community on a piece of legislation. Like, for example, there's a service dog bill that is being introduced this time. And part of what this bill does is it really limits who can train service animals and how that training needs to be done. The blind community, lots of the blind community are very much in favor of it because they really are used to a very specific training regime for their service animals, whereas I'm very used to working with people who have service animals and use them for a mental health disability, for example, and they may have trained their own animal. So we as GCDE might sign in as other on a bill like that and explain, why we think it's important and where we think the pitfalls could be or something like that. So as you could see, you sign in with your position, your first, last name, your email, your phone number. It's really just a matter of becoming part of the record. And then you just hit submit. And that's all you need to do if you wanted to sign in pro for a bill.
Elizabeth, this is Elaine. Do you have to be a Washington State resident to do any of this?
Gosh, it's a great question. I believe so, but I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, if you were living in Washington and had a Washington resident, I don't know why you couldn't. And well, now that I say this out loud, I've been in hearings where they've had people testify from other states who have research related to a bill or that kind of thing. So I would guess you'd have to have a Washington residence, but I don't know that it doesn't ask you if you're, and by residence, I mean address, not
Right.
you are a resident. So
Okay.
I don't believe you have to be a registered voter, but I will get the answer to that and let you know, and you can report
Okay.
back to people.
That'd be great.
The other thing I wanted to show you that I think there's a few things that I think are really interesting. The first is there's a whole bill information page, and this goes through all the bills all the way back. So there's a lot of information. So if you wanted to do research on specific bills related to a particular topic, you can do it from this page. I will say, and I use this page prior to session starting to read all the bills that have been pre-filed. And as you can see right now, there's no bills available here because we're in session. So there is no such thing as pre-filed during session. But these are all the bills in the first Monday of December. People can start filing bills, even though the session doesn't start till January. So for those of us who do research on the legislature, this is the place to go to see all the first bills that come out. The other thing that I think is really interesting is if you wanted to, there are some times when reading the reports to the legislature can give you a clue about upcoming legislation. And there's a button down here on the bottom of this screen called Reports to the Legislature. And some of these reports are not all that interesting because they're sort of routine, but there are some that are definitely have been commissioned by certain committees of the legislature. And so you can get a sense of where the legislature might go. And so if you wanted to look at all of the bills that have been filed for 2023, for example, and then you can sort them by any of these things up here. I like to sort by organization name because I'm not going to really read the ones from Department of Agriculture, but I might really be interested in looking at some of the bills from Commerce, because Commerce is where the housing work comes out of. Sorry for the scrolling. So, for example, here's one on workplace response to domestic violence. I'm guessing this is a report that might actually have policy implications. So if you wanted to dig further, like right here is the 2023 Affordable Housing Update. So if you want to do housing advocacy, this is a great place to find that.
I have one thought. One of the things that I had to learn when I started testifying is that they are really strict about the time limits. Oftentimes you think you're going to have 3 minutes and you get there and a whole bunch of people have signed up. And so you're limited to 1.5 minutes, for example. And so I have learned that if they say it's going to be 3 minutes, I prepare a 3-minute version, I prepare a 2.5-minute version, and I prepare a 2-minute version. I'm really struggling with this 1-minute version for Friday, but that was one of the things that surprised me.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And particularly if there's a lot of people testifying, I always make notes to myself so I have them in front of me. One of the things that is cool about doing remote testimony is you can pull your document over your screen so you don't have to look at the committee looking at you, and you can just look at your bullets. You're still making eye contact with the camera, so your testimony is going to look just fine. Just something that helps me if my nerves are getting to me. I try to do a few different things. I have bullets available. I might pull some data. So if there's nobody who's talking about data, because I'm sort of in that professional role, having data is sort of an expectation for me. The other thing is, if somebody in front of you has already made a point you want to double down on, you can say, well, gosh, I just want to say what Elaine said is really true for me too, and here's more about that. So there's ways to make it work. But yeah, those 1-minute ones are you can pack a lot in, but you have to practice. And and if you only have 1 minute, paying attention to what has already been said and not duplicating is really your best tool there.
I just wanted to say that Paulette said thank you for the introduction, and she'll just have to poke around on the website, and give her a try.
Yeah, and if you get lost, just you can click back up on the top banner and it always brings you back to this page. And what I love is you can always hit contact your legislators. And if they have them here alphabetically. And if you don't know who your legislators are, here's find your district. And you can just put in your street address and they'll tell you who it is. And so that's really easy to use. Oh, the other thing, before I leave here, one other thing I wanted to tell you is if you go to this link on Legislative Information Center, there are some really wonderful trainings available. If you go to classes and tutorials, there's some really basic classes on the legislative process, on navigating the website, and they're really good and they're really quick. So those are really good. And then they also have historical data. So you really can dig as deeply as you want to.
Does anybody else have any questions about the website or anything that Elizabeth has talked about? I know it's been a lot of information with a couple different speakers, but be happy to answer any questions that you have. And if I miss a hand raised or a chat, please let me know. And Elizabeth, if people come up with a question, then you'll be able to answer that at a later time.
Of
I
course.
can
Yeah.
Okay.
And if there's legislation that you all identify that we can partner on, let me know. This is part of what we do.
All right. Well, I'm not seeing any hands up. So Elizabeth, thank you so much for coming tonight.
Of course.
I know you work full time, and to do this on your evenings is really appreciated.
Of course. No, thank you all for your advocacy, and I'm excited that y'all will be joining us on the right to repair bill. We think that's super important too.
Absolutely. There's another, just quickly, the Nothing About Us Without Us bill. Can you just mention what that's about and kind of where that is right now?
Sure. Nothing About Us Without Us, and I'm going to pull up the bill number because I'm not lots of people remember bill numbers really well. I'm not that person. So this is House Bill 1541. And this bill was introduced for the first time a couple of sessions ago. Essentially, it was born out of the experience of a number of people with developmental disabilities who had been invited to be part of a group that was creating the future for services for people with developmental disabilities, and they weren't given what they needed to be able to participate effectively. And so one of those advocates went to their elected official, and the very first version of this bill was born a couple of years ago. So essentially, Nothing About Us Without Us is about making sure that people with lived experience are at the table for every bill, every work group that government puts on, so that people with lived experience are the ones that are shaping policy. What came out of that particular work group that originally created this bill was a future for the developmental disabilities community that really did not resonate with the people with lived experience. And so the idea is it's going to require government to make sure that people with lived experiences are at the table giving input when policy is created. So at this point, last session, we made it further than we ever have. We actually it passed the House, and it made it through committee in the Senate, and then it died in the Senate Rules Committee. And we haven't been able to get a lot of insight as to why it died. It actually had bipartisan support. And interestingly enough, one of the partners at the table were people who live in rural communities. There were a lot of folks who really understood this from the perspective of, I live in a rural community and all the decisions for my community are getting made in well-populated areas like Seattle. And so there was support across both aisles. So this session, I believe it will either get reintroduced in rules or it may back up a step. I know Representative Farvar, who is the bill sponsor and used to work at Disability Rights of Washington, she's an incredible advocate for people with disabilities. She was thinking of backing it up a step so that she could provide additional education to the Senate. It's just a bill that isn't as well known there. And that is why we think it died, was that we were in the last crush of the session. And because it wasn't as well known, it didn't have as much oomph as it needed to get out of the Senate. So the governor's office is definitely interested in it. Dante Payne, who is the governor's policy advisor on civil rights, is out talking about this bill. So I think that we have a lot more firepower this year, and I think it'll cross the finish line. At least I hope so. But it really is about ensuring that people with disabilities are at the table if there's a bill or a program or a study being done on people with disabilities. We want to make sure that we have that lived experience so that our government is responsive to the people.
What do you mean when you say a bill dies? What is that?
Well, essentially, there's a few different ways a bill can die. And what that means is it just stops. It doesn't move forward from where it is. So one of the ways a bill can die is it gets introduced into a committee and the committee doesn't take a vote on it. Then the bill would die. It wouldn't make it out of that committee. It wouldn't have that committee's support, so it wouldn't move forward. Another place that a bill can die is maybe it has an impact of over $50,000. And so it goes into a fiscal committee, one of the finance committees, and the finance committee doesn't vote it out. It can die there. Another way that a bill can die is it makes it through those two committees, then it goes to rules, and the rules committee never puts it on the floor calendar so that the members of that chamber can vote on it. That's another place that our bills have died. In fact, that's where Nothing About Us Without Us died, not last session, but the session before, was it never made it to the floor calendar. So another place the bill can die is so as soon as it's gone through all of that in the one chamber, it starts over and does all of that in the other chamber. So it could definitely die in committee in the other chamber. The other thing which also affects bills, and this is a place where a lot of bills fall off, is they don't make it through the process fast enough. There are things called cutoff calendars. And if your bill hasn't made it past a certain point by a certain date, it essentially dies because it just doesn't have enough time to be heard and for all the things to happen that need to happen. It's rare, but the governor, another place a bill could die is that the legislature could pass the bill. So the House passes it and then the Senate passes it. It could go to the governor and the governor could veto it or partially veto it. When I see most often is the governor will partially veto something that requires funding and there isn't funding in the budget. But I don't believe I've seen any full vetoes in the time that I've been in this role. So did that help?
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot of places a bill can die.
Can I add something from a really informal perspective?
Yeah.
There are Facebook groups around sometimes around just specific issues. Like a lot of family members of people who are incarcerated belong to a group that follows all of those bills, because of course there's been a big push on that stuff. And then I just discovered today, there's a Facebook group that's supporting House Bill 2184, authorizing payment for parental caregivers of minor children with developmental disabilities.
In the ostomy.
Okay, no worries. And I was a little confused by that because I thought that parental caregivers of kids could already get paid, but apparently not. So I'm not sure. But anyhow, there's a Facebook group for that.
Yeah, I tell you, I really do go out and look at everybody else's websites because I always find things that somehow I've missed. So I think it can be really useful to get the word out there. The other thing that's useful about it is you can find out what people's objections are. There are certain groups that show up on, remember I showed you the who's going to testify list. There are certain groups that show up on that and I have a pretty good sense of what their issue is going to be with a bill. But it can be really useful to get a sense of those concerns early, because that way, hopefully you can work with those people before you get to the hearing to iron out any issues that might be coming up. So for example, like with the service animal bill, I was really surprised to find out that the disability community is somewhat divided on that, because to me, flexibility around training of service animals was sort of a given, but it's not with certain communities. So I think having that could be really useful to mobilize people.
All right. Yeah, I could definitely see that too. It's wonderful. Yeah, if they don't have a Facebook page on something you're passionate about, then you can start one yourself. So this is all exciting. And yeah, this is really open to anyone, isn't it, Elizabeth, to start a grassroots movement of wanting to see something pass, or just to get involved with the system. So
yeah,
that's exciting. All right, well, I'm not seeing any hands up or questions in the chat. So thank you again, Elizabeth, for being here today. And yeah, it's exciting to see. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. You're doing this as a favor to me, and it's very nice of you. So, all right, well, thank you for being here tonight. And thank you to everyone who joined. Kenny, do you have any last words?
Not really. I just want to thank everybody again. Thank you, Elizabeth, for the information and the background to all that stuff. It's a tremendous tool, and it's definitely opened my eyes to a lot of stuff. And thanks, Marsha, and the whole DACWA, Marty, everybody, for bringing this to our attention and getting this thing up on the forum. And
Sounds
thank you,
good.
everybody.
All right, have a nice evening.
Thank you all.
bye everyone.
Thanks, Marty.